Picture this. A big-name actor strolls on stage to introduce a screening of one of his classic flicks. So far, so good, but hold up. He's rocking a dress. It's wild, it's outrageous, it's hilarious. The crowd, they're totally eating it up. Little did they know, this wacky moment was just a warm-up for what was coming. Legendary Academy Award-winning actor Richard Dreyfuss going off and ranting about sex changes for kids and the parents who push that kind of stuff onto them. He would also share his thoughts on women in Hollywood and some controversial opinions on the whole #MeToo thing. Talk about a plot twist. For some reason, at a screening of Jaws, everybody thought Richard Dreyfuss was gonna talk about Jaws. Was this another celebrity crash and burn? You know, Hollywood chewing him up and spitting him out? Or is this just the same old Richard Dreyfuss that we've always known? Like him or not, or agree or disagree with him, he always seems to make his political opinions theatrical? He's just a guy who's always spoken his mind. Consequences be damned. And maybe, just maybe, it was this type of rebellious attitude that made him a big-time actor in the first place. Because what you see is what you get with Mr. Dreyfuss, on and off the screen. But lately, it seems like he's been mostly off the screen. But has he really? What the F has he been up to besides shopping for dresses? And how did it get to this point? Well, after that, and seeing him on Bill Maher's podcast where he's sloppily slunked over like a beached shark or a floppy blob of mashed potatoes. So yeah, what the f*** happened to Richard Dreyfuss? But to truly understand what the f*** happened to Richard Dreyfuss, we must begin at the beginning, and the beginning began when he was born on his birthday, 1947, Brooklyn. Young Dreyfuss bounced around roles in Hollywood and on Broadway, notably delivering literally one line in The Graduate before grabbing everyone's attention as Babyface Nelson in John Milius's Dillinger. This was followed by George Lucas's classic 1973 coming-of-age masterpiece, American Graffiti, where young Richie D would show off his everyday, boy-next-door, regular guy charisma. 1974 saw him in The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, where he got to show off some of his own stubborn determination. But his lifelong creative partnership with Steven Spielberg started, of course, with 1975's Jaws. Though calling it a partnership doesn't quite capture it. There's no Richard Dreyfuss without Steven Spielberg, and there's no Steven Spielberg without Richard Dreyfuss. Mr. Dreyfuss has been called Steven Spielberg's muse, and is definitely the guy Steven Spielberg used when he wanted to put himself into his movies. So when you see Richard Dreyfuss in a Steven Spielberg movie, you're actually watching Steven Spielberg himself. And boy, oh boy, did they hit it big. Jaws remains Richard Dreyfuss's highest-grossing film, even without adjusting for inflation. Jaws didn't just make waves, it created a whole gosh darn tsunami in Hollywood and beyond. It basically rewrote the rules for movies, money-making, and how we look at the ocean. After Richard Dreyfuss was inserted into the movie inserts, he would get right back to working with Steven Spielberg again in 1977's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Richard Dreyfuss was reportedly the 6th choice for this role, after Steve McQueen, Gene Hackman, Dustin Hoffman, Jack Nicholson, and Al Pacino all turned it down. But now it's practically impossible to imagine any other actor portraying an everyman's descent into madness any better.
Because I thought when I read the script that it was the greatest film script I'd ever read and I wanted to be a part of that project. I really didn't look at it, at least very intelligently, as an actor should. I just wanted to be in on this film.
Dreyfuss eventually wore Spielberg down by talking with him endlessly about the project, with Richard even contributing some ideas. He also not so subtly talked down the actors chosen ahead of him. Like when Richard would walk past Steven Spielberg's office, he would say things like, "Al Pacino has no sense of humor," or "Jack Nicholson is too crazy." So Richard was finally cast in Close Encounters and, it was perfect. So, Richard was right. Like how he's right about everything. So yeah, at this time, Richard Dreyfuss, he was on frickin' fire. 2 massive Steven Spielberg pop cultural phenomenons under his belt. Things could not get any better for this actor, but then they did. when he won the Oscar for Best Actor in 1977 for the film The Goodbye Girl, when he was just 30 years old, making him the youngest at the time to win that award. Adrian Brody beat him out. But at 5 foot 4.5 inches, Richard Dreyfuss is still the shortest guy to ever win Best Actor. But you know, height isn't a competition, unlike the movie The Competition, which Richard Dreyfuss also starred in 1980. So yeah, because it was the 80s, Richard Dreyfuss decided to do a lot of drugs and stuff, and because of this, he has absolutely no memory of filming 1981's Whose Life Is It Anyway? Which is a shame because it's actually a thought-provoking film about a person's right to die. And then Richard Dreyfuss almost actually died himself in a 1982 car accident. He didn't injure anyone else in the accident, but while he was in the hospital, he had a vision of a young girl in a white dress, who he took as a representation of the innocent lives he placed at risk with his reckless behavior. This vision and wake-up call was the push that he needed to get his act together. Get it? Act together? Because he's an actor. He was no longer down and out in Beverly Hills, but he was in a movie called Down and Out in Beverly Hills, which really gave us a good look at his comedic chops. And I think we all remember him bookending Stand By Me, making that movie even better. This was followed by Tin Men, Nuts, and 1987's Stakeout opposite Emilio Estevez, which people liked enough to justify a sequel called Another Stakeout in 1993. So yeah, then Richard Dreyfuss was in stuff like Moon Over Parador, Let It Ride, Postcards from the Edge. Also, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. He was making these movies all around the same time he would become a friendly ghost when he was back working with Steven Spielberg for 1987's Always. Then came one of Richard Dreyfuss's better comedies, called What About Bob, with Richard Dreyfuss playing a psychiatrist, which is something he often does, perfectly playing off of Bill Murray in this 1991 funny movie. Then came movies like Once Around, Lost in Yonkers, and Silent Fall. Then in 1995, he would re-team with his Stand By Me director, Rob Reiner, playing a senator who's running for president in The American President, before being nominated for an Oscar for his passionate, soulful performance in 1996's Mr. Holland's Opus. He got to lean into his Brooklyn accent as Mr. Centipede in James and the Giant Peach, and in 1996 he got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. This was followed by the disappointing Krippendorf's Tribe, and the elderly mobster movie The Crew.
I want you to whack somebody.
Nobody's gonna whack nobody.
The Crew is Goodfellas meets Grumpy Old Men. The Crew. Now on video and DVD.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
After something called The Old Man Who Read Love Stories, he would switch over to television, earning a Satellite Award and a SAG nomination for his role in The Day Reagan Was Shot, followed by 2004's Silver City, where Richard plays an over-the-top campaign manager. Politics. Then, for some reason, they remade The Poseidon Adventure. And for some reason, they just called it Poseidon. And for some reason, they put Richard Dreyfuss in it. And for some reason, they showed this on my honeymoon, which for some reason was on a cruise ship. And for some reason, there were no sharks in this one. There totally could have been, because ocean. But viewers of the 2007 Jaws documentary, called The Shark Is Still Working, may have been surprised to find that, Richard Dreyfuss is still working. Then he was perfectly cast as Vice President Dick Cheney in Oliver Stone's W, and Oliver Stone said that working with Richard Dreyfuss was the single worst experience he's ever had with an actor in his life. After the movies Leaves of Grass, The Lightkeepers, My Life in Ruins, he would pop up in the trashy 2010 flick Piranha 3D for a blatant Jaws homage. Then came that movie Red, which at the time everybody seemed to really like, and this may be his last big, pretty good movie that he's been in. although he's not in it very much. I'm just gonna quickly go through what he's done since 2010, and if you've heard of any of these, congratulations. Paranoia, Cass and Dylan, Zipper, the ABC miniseries Madoff, Book Club The Next Chapter, Bayou Caviar, Netflix's The Last Laugh, Astronaut, Polar, Daughter of the Wolf, and other things and other stuff.
I can't remember a time when I wasn't driven by rage.
He was featured in a wonderful documentary / puff piece called Spielberg, and recently he's given us things like Crime Story, every last one of them, Murder at Yellowstone City, Sweetwater. Then Richard Dreyfuss decided to do the shark thing again, and was featured in a Baby Shark crossover episode of Bubble Guppies. So yeah, from Jaws to Baby Shark. That pretty much sums up Richard Dreyfuss. He does have a handful of projects in the works, so the dude is not slowing down, and you gotta respect that. But yeah, where the F does that leave Richard Dreyfuss now? Like when I say the name Richard Dreyfuss, what do you see? Do you see a man in a dress? Or do you see one of his characters on screen making cinema history? You know, spraying his American graffiti all over the place. I kinda see both, and I kinda like it. I like when artists are complex and controversial and say things that stir up conversations. Sometimes we need people like this. Sometimes the world can get boring, so every now and then it's okay to throw on a dress and go on a rant and watch Jaws. Because seriously, y'all should watch Jaws. It's like the greatest movie ever made. And you know what happens to a shark if it stops swimming? Well, it dies. And Richard Dreyfuss actually said something similar. He said that if I don't do this, that's when he's gonna need a doctor. That's when he's gonna really sink to the bottom of the ocean floor. Or the cutting room floor. But yeah, he's still making movies and I hope they're good. So nobody should give a fuck about what the fuck happened to Richard Dreyfuss because he's doing this and it's fine.